The quiet grief of being needed less. No one really warns you about the sadness that comes when your phone stops ringing. Not because you did something wrong, not because you disappeared, but because somehow people no longer need you the way they once did. You're still here, still thinking, still caring, yet the calls slow down. The requests fade. The roles you once filled so naturally, quietly dissolve. And you're left with a feeling you don't quite know how to name. It's not jealousy. It's not anger. It's grief. A quiet grief for a version of yourself that mattered to others every day. If you've ever looked at your phone and felt that ache, not from rejection, but from absence, you're not imagining it. And you're not alone. This conversation is for that part of you. 1. When usefulness fades. There was a time when your days were shaped by what others needed from you. Phone calls with questions, requests that filled your schedule, responsibilities that gave your life structure. You didn't question it, you simply showed up. Being needed felt natural. When usefulness fades, the silence that follows can feel unsettling. Now, the calls come less often. The questions stop, not because you lost your ability, but because your role quietly changed. And in that quiet, you begin to notice something. Without those needs, the days feel longer, less defined. You're still capable, still present, yet something feels missing. It's not the work you miss, it's the sense that your presence made a difference in someone else's day. And when that sense fades, it leaves behind a question you rarely say out loud. If no one needs me right now, who am I meant to be? 2. Identity after responsibility. For a long time, your identity was clear. You were the one others relied on, the one who handled things, the one who showed up without being asked. Responsibility gave shape to who you were. It told you where to be, what mattered, why your days had purpose. When responsibility fades, identity often feels unsteady. Now, with fewer demands, you're left with a strange question. Who are you when no one is waiting on you? It's not that you feel useless, it's that the mirror has changed. Without those roles, you feel less defined. You don't know where to place your energy, or how to measure your worth. And because this change happens quietly, no one acknowledges it. People assume you're enjoying the rest. But inside, there's a subtle disorientation. Not because you need to be busy, but because you've spent a lifetime understanding yourself through what you provided for others. Letting go of that identity isn't instant. It takes time to learn who you are when your value is no longer tied to responsibility alone. 3. The grief no one names. What you feel isn't sadness in the way people expect. There's no clear loss to point to, no single moment that explains it. And yet, something inside you aches. The hardest grief is the one you're told you shouldn't have. You didn't lose a person. You didn't lose your health. You didn't lose your home. So you tell yourself you shouldn't feel this way. But what you lost was a sense of being needed, of waking up knowing your presence mattered to someone else's day. Because this grief has no name, it often goes unnoticed, even by you. You minimize it. You stay busy. You tell yourself to be grateful. But grief doesn't require permission. It arrives when something meaningful ends, even if no one talks about it. And this kind of grief sits quietly. It doesn't demand attention. It simply waits for you to acknowledge that what you're missing was real, and that missing it makes sense. 4. Missing who you were for others. Sometimes, what you miss isn't just people. You miss the version of yourself that existed in their lives. The one who was called first. The one who knew what to do. The one whose presence made things feel steadier. You can miss who you were even when everyone you love is still alive. You miss the rhythm of being relied on. The way your days had direction because someone else depended on you. Without those moments, you feel slightly unanchored. Not lost, just less certain of where you fit. And this kind of missing can be confusing, because from the outside, nothing looks wrong. You're still capable, still caring. But inside, there's a quiet longing for a time when your presence was woven into the lives of others in a way that felt undeniable. That longing isn't about ego, it's about meaning. And losing a familiar sense of meaning can feel like losing a part of yourself, even if no one else notices. 5. Why this loss feels confusing. What makes this loss so confusing is that it doesn't look like loss. Nothing dramatic happened. No door slammed shut. No goodbye was spoken. The most confusing losses are the ones that happen without an ending. Life simply moved on. People grew more independent, roles shifted, needs changed, and slowly, without anyone intending it, you became less essential. That's why it's hard to grieve. You wonder if you're allowed to feel sad, if you're making too much of it, if you should just adjust quietly. So you question yourself instead of the change. But your heart knows something meaningful ended. Not a relationship, but a role. Not a person, but a purpose you once carried. And when loss doesn't come with permission to grieve, it often turns inward. It becomes confusion, restlessness, a low, constant ache. Understanding this doesn't erase the feeling, but it gives it context. And sometimes, being able to say, "This was a real loss," is the first step toward letting your heart breathe again. 6. Letting go without disappearing. Letting go doesn't always mean walking away. Sometimes it means releasing a role that once defined you. That can feel frightening, because for so long, being needed was how you knew you mattered. Letting go feels risky when your worth was once tied to usefulness, so you worry. If you stop holding everything together, will anyone still see you? If you step back, will you fade from view? But letting go doesn't require you to disappear. It asks for something gentler, to loosen your grip without erasing yourself, to allow others to manage their own lives while you remain present, not as a problem solver, but as a person. This kind of letting go is quiet. It doesn't announce itself. It happens when you choose to stay visible, even when you're no longer essential. And in that space, you begin to learn that your presence still has value, even when it isn't urgently needed. That realization can feel unfamiliar, but it can also be freeing. 7. Redefining meaning. Gently. Meaning doesn't disappear when you are needed less. It changes its shape. For a long time, meaning came from doing, from fixing, from being relied on. Now, it asks to arrive in quieter ways. Meaning doesn't always shout. Sometimes it settles in softly. It can live in listening without needing to respond, in being present without being responsible, in choosing how you spend your energy instead of reacting to every request. This kind of meaning is harder to recognize because it isn't urgent. No one praises it. No one depends on it. But it's real. It grows when you allow yourself to exist without proving anything. When you let moments be enough, even if no one notices them. Redefining meaning gently doesn't erase who you were. It honors it by allowing who you are now to matter just as deeply. And that quieter meaning, once you let it in, can feel surprisingly steady, like something you don't have to chase, only allow. 8. You still matter deeply. Even if fewer people need you now, you still matter. Not because of what you provide, not because of how useful you are, but because you are here. Your worth was never meant to expire when your roles changed. You didn't lose value when the calls slowed down. You gained space. Space to exist without proving, without fixing, without carrying everything. Your presence still holds weight. Your listening still matters. Your perspective still matters. Your quiet steadiness still matters. And even if the world no longer asks for you in the same way, that doesn't mean you are finished. It means you are in a different chapter, one where being is enough. And that kind of worth doesn't fade. It deepens.